Assuming you haven't just woken up from a coma or been in suspended animation or been out on Easter Island for the past 2 years, you've heard of the New World Order. Let's get into it a little bit today. I'm reading from a great journal here that's passed out in Denver Free called The Rooster, and they have some good articles. This one's on the creature of Davos. Have you heard of Davos? It's from the Juan Wilder files. So let's talk about Klaus Schwab. If you've never heard of the World Economic Forum, which is called the Davos Agenda, aka the Illuminati's global nonprofit think tank, you're about to get a crash course. To most people, it sounds like an exclusive circle jerk for elite finance geeks. And at least part, that's true. But it's also something more sinister. It's a globalization plot symposium dolled up like a business conference, turning out world domination plans disguised in cryptic corporate code speak. It's the thinly veiled syndicate implementing the New World Order, initiating a great reset, or as the forum calls it, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So here we go, diving into what may be the actual deep state Illuminati secret society nonprofit organization, the WEF. Consider this, in a capitalistic society such as ours, politics is all drama and the politicians are all actors. The real power players and decision makers of the world are corporate actors. It's the most invested businesses and wealthiest business people who hold the biggest sway and the real political power. The WEF represents the Congress of that unelected, profit-minded shadow government guiding society with its invisible hands. That's the real genius of the WEF. It's governance separated from government guidance by the powerful, the unelected elite, the corporations, united above and beyond the reach of democracy. And yet, the WEF holds the world's democracies by the balls, guiding the direction of national economies, the priorities of societies, the nature of business models, and the management of global commons. While elected officials squabble over masks and gas prices, these guys are planning and executing global agendas that don't need votes or public approval to implement. That's been Klaus Schwab's vision since he founded the WEF back in 1971. Yeah, over 50 years ago. According to Klaus, the world would be best managed by a self-selected coalition of multinational corporations and civil society organizations. Why should common people get to choose the fate of the world anyway? Who is Klaus? Well, not much is known about the 83-year-old German who started the WEF. What we do know is Klaus lives in Cologne, Switzerland, has a wife and 3 children, and sometimes likes to speak at conferences sporting flowing dark leather ceremonial robes emblazoned with mysterious symbols like a straight-up Bond villain. In other words, he's just a regular guy. Klaus has been quoted saying things like, by 2030, people around the world will own nothing and be happy about it. And governments are no longer the overwhelmingly dominant actors on the world stage. He wants to replace the standard democratic model of leadership with a group of self-selected stakeholders who make decisions for the common people. By 2020, Klaus published a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset, in which he celebrates the momentous opportunity the COVID pandemic has provided to restructure the global economy and the world system of governance. Because a good world crisis should never go to waste, especially if your nonprofit predicts it months in advance, which they did. Event 201 and the next pandemic. In October of 2019, just months before the COVID-19 pandemic erupted onto the global stage, the WEF sponsored a rather peculiar event. Hosted in partnership with Johns Hopkins and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, yes, those Gates, Event 201 simulated the outbreak of a novel coronavirus pandemic with catastrophic social, political, and economic outcomes. The predicted scenario lasted between 18 and 24 months and was only resolved once a vaccine was introduced globally, by which time global economies had slowed down significantly. Unemployment had skyrocketed across the Western world, inflation had inflated, and dependence on the government, industry, and key international institutions had dramatically expanded. Does that sound familiar? Well, now the WEF is at it again. In January of this year, they started simulating the next pandemic, and this is coming. A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics, one that will cripple the world's access to the internet and digital services, one that will require a worldwide whiteout or blackout, however you look at it, wherein the internet at large is completely shut down and scrubbed front to back, eyes to asshole by our great protectors, the feds. After all, only big government, propaganda intelligence machines like the FBI and CIA can discern truth from lies, fact from fiction, and threat from utility. Right? Right. Or perhaps since this cyber pandemic would be global, it could elicit the creation of a new intelligence agency altogether, one that extends beyond the national borders and above democracy, much like the WEF itself. So, all I can tell you folks is strap your seatbelts in tight because we're in for a bumpy ride before this year's over. To be continued.